Welcome to Healing from Grief and Loss, where top experts guide you on your journey to find strength, comfort, and joy again. I'm Andrea, your host, and on today's show, I have the lovely Serita Braxton, our guest expert today. She is an author and a copywriter and a blogger. Thank you so much, Serita, for being here. I'm so excited to have you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share my experience with your viewers.
Yes. So, along with many others, including myself, you've had some personal loss. Would you mind sharing a little bit of that with my audience today?
Yes, of course. So when I was growing up, I didn't have any personal experiences with loss. I mean, I understood what happens, distant relatives or friend of a friend passes away. And obviously it was very sad, but growing up, I didn't have a great relationship with my father. He was introduced to me in my teenage years, and he unfortunately didn't stick around. But prior to him coming into my life, I felt like everything was fine. I felt like I had everything I needed. And actually his introduction into my life made me realize the loss that I had not having a father figure around as I was growing up. And years went by without speaking with him, and my mom actually Googled his name and discovered that he had passed away. So his family didn't share with us that he had passed away. My mom found it through an online search. And that brought up some feelings of anger and resentment that I didn't even realize that I had. I realized my tumultuous and distant relationship with him was affecting the way that I built relationships in life, which is something I needed to tackle personally. And then 3 years ago, I lost my mom, who was my very best friend in the world. She was almost like my therapist. We talked multiple times a day, sometimes just on the phone while she's at work for hours. And it was sudden. I actually went home to spend time with her. And the first full day I was there, she suddenly passed away. It wasn't expected. And it wasn't something that I prepared for. And that was an incredibly challenging loss that I still am trying to work through today. But 3 years later, I've learned a lot of lessons through that experience.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm sorry for your losses. So, did you have a support system at all going through like 3 years ago when your mom passed? Did you have any sort of support system? I know your mom was there for you with your dad, but how about when she passed?
Unfortunately, it was a really challenging time aside from the loss of my mom. So I had just moved to a whole other country. I didn't really have a community there. I moved there with no friends, no work. And so about 6 months into my move to a new country, my mom passed away. I chose not to stay home. I decided to come back to my new home of Berlin. So I had family and friends in the US, and at the time that I was there, they were really supportive, but it's so different when you are living in a completely different country and different time zone. So I essentially went through it by myself, physically and sometimes mentally. I felt like it was too much to continue to reach out to friends. It's not their burden to bear, trying to help me through my grief. Sometimes it also made it worse when people don't know what to say, and so you're pouring out your feelings and their response is not hitting the spot that you need. So it was really challenging. So I essentially handled it alone and had to learn how to grieve by myself. Yeah.
It is sort of a tricky process, because I sort of felt the same way. Like you don't want to burden people. You don't want to, be that broken record, but you have to talk about it. You have to get it out. And so yeah, so that's kind of,
Right.
it's kind of tough. And then, when you have family or friends that don't really understand and aren't really saying the things that you're needing to hear, it can be a struggle. So uh, the point is, that I'm trying to get across, of course, through this series, is I don't want people having to, do this alone and feel like they are a burden, or, uh, you know, sounding like the broken record. I want them to be able to reach out, and there's so much support out there, and love and compassion, and so yeah, that's the whole thing we're trying to do here. So can you give us an idea of just some of the things you did to help you through the process, even when you were doing it on your own? I know a few have mentioned journaling. It's good to get it out on paper, and of course you're a writer, so you're great at that. But are there any other things you can share with the audience, just to sort of help them on their way if they're going through a similar loss right now?
I would say, sort of along the lines of what you mentioned, to seek out or to confide in people who have shared the same sort of loss as you. Of course, it depends on where you're living. There may be in-person support groups, or I've even had people reach out to me on social media after sharing my grief openly. I think sometimes we aren't really appropriately taught how to grieve. I had a lot of people say, "Oh, everything's going to be okay, and you're going to get through that, But what about now? What about what I'm feeling today?" It shouldn't be pushing your feelings away. And I feel like when you talk to people who have been through the same loss, they understand. They know not to wish it away. Everything's going to be fine. You're going to get through this. They just listen. They're patient. They're sympathetic. I've found the greatest part of this loss of my mom was the fact that I wouldn't be able to just tell her about my day. And a lot of people said, talk out loud to her. And I thought, that seems kind of silly. Like, I'm not really comfortable doing that. But actually, there were times, especially when it was hard, when I was upset or got some bad news, some good news, like I would say to her whatever I was going through that day, along with writing it out, essentially just having a conversation with her, even though I wasn't able to get that response. But I noticed, and maybe it's our internal wishes that we see signs, but when I allow myself to be open to talking to her, there was actually a moment where I was looking for something in her house, and it was me and two other people searching for this item, and we could not find it anywhere. And I'm like, I know that it's here. And I said, Mom, where is it? And I turn around and it's sitting right on top of the microwave. And like, we had been looking for about a good hour. And, maybe it's just my wishful thinking, but sometimes this makes you feel like the loss, isn't as definitive. Like, there may be signs if you allow yourself to be open to this. I don't know. I found it a little comforting.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing that. I know that some people do have a little sort of set up with things of their loved ones, and they do talk to them, and it does find them comfort. Having just a little memory area, and it's okay to talk out loud. I mean, a lot of people do the journaling, but on the note of people not knowing what to say, I think because we just grew up in an era where even our parents and their parents, like you just didn't talk about grief. It was so the person passed and you had the funeral and say goodbye, and that's it. You don't talk about it again. and we we have to get over that. It's an emotion that we just have to get out in the open and not be afraid to talk about it. But you're right. We finding someone who has been through it, I think, is a lot easier than having someone that hasn't been through it, because they do say dumb things, or they don't know what to say, or so it can be tricky for sure. So in your process, what sort of got you up in the morning? Like, what was because you were alone and you didn't really, didn't have anyone coming in and, opening the blinds and saying, get up. And there must have been something that you said to yourself, Serita, I'm getting up this morning because, like, what were the sort of steps, the initial steps you took?
That was definitely a challenge, especially the first few weeks, even months. I sort of assigned myself the goal of continuing to do things that would make my mom proud. And this can be whoever it is, whether it's a spouse or a child, or like I found things that I was passionate about, but also things that my mom was passionate about, and almost continuing the torch of, she liked to share lots of news and history facts. So then I started doing that, and I received a lot of positive feedback from her online community. Like, thank you so much. We really love that she was sharing this, and we love that you're continuing this. I also started writing. So while it's something that I'm passionate about professionally, it's also like, it was a personal passion project prior to that. And I started writing my book. This gave me a goal, like essentially setting goals for myself, saying, okay, today I want to get 10 pages done. And if I could just focus on that, then I feel like, okay, I've given myself a purpose for the day. It's something that, would make my mom proud that I'm continuing this. So I think, just setting goals, even if it's something small, saying I'm going to go for a walk for 30 minutes, and just accomplishing that goal makes you feel really good. And it makes you feel like, okay, I got out of bed for a reason today. I give myself something to look forward to.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's tough. I found that one of the hardest things, like, what's the point in getting up? But it's the baby steps, and just doing little things, whether, like you say, it's a walk or just doing a bit of writing. Or I'm fortunate enough to be on a farm where I've got, the comic relief of my animals, and I can go out and hang out with them and talk to them and get some peace from that. So yes, well, some good little nuggets there. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your advice with us. Is there anything before we go? Is there anything you'd like to leave the listeners with?
Yeah, I'm sure you probably will say this a lot or hear this a lot, but everyone grieves in their own way. And I think that's really important to remember and tell yourself, especially if maybe you're going through a loss of family and other people are handling things a certain way. One, not to judge their way of grief, but also to realize that your grief process is your own, and however that looks, as long as you're taking care of yourself and you're practicing healthy habits, just allow yourself to go through your own grief process.
I love that. Thank you. That is so true. Everyone's grief is different, and there's not one that's better or worse than the other, and it definitely is a process, and it takes time. You can't put a time limit on that at all. So thank you for that. So thank you so much for being here. I know we could talk for another half an hour, but we will end there. And I just want to thank you so much for being a part of this with me, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is really special, and I'm grateful that you're doing this.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Serita. And thank you to my viewers today for joining in. I hope something touched your soul. Serita had some great little tidbits of advice for you. She definitely touched my soul. So on that note, be safe and be kind to yourself. Take the time you need, and remember, you are not alone. So until the next time, bye for now.